software development manager for a global business support systems company. She was only 35 when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. Michelle is active on the American Cancer Society Relay for Life for Douglas County Planning Committee since 2004 and has chaired the event twice. She is the oldest of 4 siblings and the proud mama to Bailey, a Jack Russell Terrier Beagle Rescue Dog. Please help me in welcoming Michelle. Take just a second to get organized here. If I push a button and something happens, I apologize. Moving the keyboard. God, who knew I was so high maintenance? My family's sake.
I know.
Can everybody hear me okay? Alright, good. You know, they offered me one of those over-the-head mouthpiece kind of things like Madonna wears, but I no longer have the cones to support that, so I have to stay behind the podium. I was also going to bring my own stool because when I told Justin that I'm only 5'2", and I hoped that the podium would not be higher than me, he just kind of said, that'll be close. So, but I'm happy to say no stool. So I am Michelle Skolnick, and I'm an American Cancer Society 2012 Hero of Hope for Nebraska. I'm also and I feel very privileged to be here today to tell you my story. About 20 years ago at synagogue, my rabbi said, any landing that you can walk away from is a good landing. Now the rabbi, for him, he had an actual bumpy landing experience, and that served as a metaphor for how he thought that we should look at turbulence in our lives, and that day he built his sermon around that topic. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2001 at the age of 35, the rabbi's words lingered in my mind. Now, I've been flying my whole life. When I was young, there were flights to visit my grandparents and flights to summer camp. Those trips were always packed with the anticipation of the arrival at the final destination. Seeing the coconut trees in Hollywood Beach, Florida, or the rustic cabins deep in the woods of Wild Rose, Wisconsin. And I am old enough to remember the days when airline food was served on real plates, and flight attendants, or stewardesses as we called them back then, would pin official wings on you, and if you were really, really lucky, you got to go visit the pilots in the cockpit. So I have always loved flying, being held aloft by the physics of it all, which most folks either do not truly understand or spend time debating whether the explanation really starts with Newton or Bernoulli in the physics world. So in spite of the physics behind an airplane getting off the ground, cruising at an altitude that I would prefer not to think about, and then landing safely, I have my own theory that the finger of God plays an important part in all safe departures and arrivals. It is this theory upon which I heavily relied when I officially boarded my cancer flight almost 12 years ago. Now, unlike any other flight I had ever taken, I had not purchased a ticket in advance or built an elaborate pre-trip checklist to make sure that I had packed all of the essentials, glasses, toothbrush, outfits and shoes selected for maximum comfort during all the trip activities, and underwear, which I actually forgot once on a 3-day business trip. Thus resulted in the pre-trip checklist I use today. Story. Now this flight was very different from any other that I had ever boarded before. So it was the last day of January in 2001 when I rolled over in the middle of the night and I felt a stabbing pain in my right breast. I reached over and grabbed the area from where the pain seemed to be radiating, and I felt it. It was not what we typically think of as the discernible lump when we think about breast cancer, but rather the whole side of my breast just felt hard. I rolled over and went back to sleep, but the next morning as I was about to hop in the shower, I noticed in the mirror on my right breast there was a little puckering on the outside, which I have since come to know is is often indicative of trouble on the inside. So now is probably a really good time to admit that I did not do regular self-breast examinations. My double Ds were very fibrous, and I was convinced that I would never, ever, ever feel a lump in there. However, my doctor did tell me that if I did this self-exam regularly and felt around, I would notice if there were a difference. So it was important to do these exams each month. And I started out with the best of intentions. I had that card thing hanging from the shower head to serve as a reminder, and every month came and went, and I stopped even noticing that thing hanging from the shower head. So after that night, when I felt it, for a variety of reasons, I postponed going to my doctor until the end of February. Now, the pre-boarding activities started here with a call to my internist. Hi, this is Michelle Skolnick, and I need to make an appointment with Dr. Jasper, please. The receptionist politely indicated that Dr. Jasper's first appointment would be in 6 weeks. So I followed up with a lump in my breast, and she followed up with, he'll see you on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Much to my delight at that moment, there actually was truth to that thing I'd heard about playing a cancer card, because Tuesday was only 4 days away. And those 4 days passed really, really quickly. So after about 3 minutes of palpating the offending area and the other breast, Dr. Jasper immediately sent me to the mammography clinic. And 2 days later, I had a consult with an oncology surgeon, and the following day, the first Friday in March 2001, that oncology surgeon excised part of a 4-centimeter mass from my breast in the small, well-lit procedure room in his office. He could tell just by looking at it, and I could tell just by looking at him. And it was precisely 12:15 p.m., and he uttered the words that I dreaded, but I kind of already knew: you have cancer. At that moment, it felt like all the air had just been sucked out of the room, and I officially found my seat aboard that plane. And then the customary announcements over the PA system started. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please stow your carry-on luggage underneath the seat in front of you or in an overhead bin. Please take your seat and fasten your seatbelt. And also make sure your seat back and folding trays are in their full upright position. If you are seated next to an emergency exit, please read carefully the special instruction card located in the seat pocket in front of you. If you are unable to perform the functions described in the event of an emergency, please ask a flight attendant to reseat you. If you have any questions about our flight today, please don't hesitate to ask one of our flight attendants. Thank you. Wait a minute. Stow my bags, sit my butt down, fasten my seatbelt, and make sure my seat back and folding tray is in the full and upright position. Are you kidding me? I hadn't even packed for this trip, although I was quite certain that I was going to need something huge for all of the emotional baggage that I was about to acquire. And what was all this nonsense about an emergency exit? I didn't see any way out, and besides, there were not any special instructions on a card located in a seat pocket in front of me to tell me what functions were required in the event of an emergency. This whole thing was an emergency. Where the hell would they have received me anyway? Because that plane was filling up fast. It was getting full of my family and my friends, and full of pilots heading toward the cockpit, and full of flight attendants scurrying about helping the other passengers. I left the surgeon's office that Friday with an appointment scheduled 3 days later on Monday to find out more about what kind of breast cancer I had and the characteristics of my cancer. My cancer. In my wildest dreams, I never, ever, ever thought that I would say the words, my cancer. I desperately needed a plan of attack to be assured that the pilots had a really good map of where we were headed. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Captain Cancer, welcome aboard Deer in the Headlight Airlines Flight 666, non-stop service from panic and anxiety to fear and uncertainty. We will be departing shortly. Our flight time is unknown, but please be prepared for turbulence and long layovers. Thank you. I spent the remainder of that afternoon surrounded by family and friends. We were all just trying to make sense of everything that had doubly difficult because I had just taken Vicodin to numb the pain caused by the biopsy. But there was no pill for the other pain that we all felt. I don't remember much about those first few hours, other than chaos, except for one little story about some peas. You see, after the oncology surgeon stitched me up, he advised me that icing the area would indeed help with the pain. So in the midst of all the chaos, my mother sent my father to the grocery market for a few items, and I suggested that perhaps frozen peas would be a good thing to use instead of ice cubes. So when my dad came back, he had, and I'm not kidding, the largest bag of peas that I had ever seen in my entire life. So this resulted in my parents having the most ridiculous argument about why my father would buy such a large bag of peas, because putting such a heavy thing on my wound would cause more pain. Which ended with my mother telling my father that he had to go back to that store immediately and buy a smaller bag of peas. Now, in my, and I promise you, one moment of utter clarity during that afternoon's Vicodin haze, I suggested that perhaps the large bag of peas was actually a good idea because we could subdivide it into about 267 smaller Ziploc bags, and I'd have a constant supply of frozen and reusable peas. Problem solved. So then I heard the flight attendant come back over the PA system. In the event of a decompression, an oxygen mask will automatically appear in front of you. To start the flow of oxygen, pull the mask towards you. Place it firmly over your nose and mouth, secure the elastic band behind your head, and breathe normally. Although the bag does not inflate, oxygen is flowing to the mask. If you are traveling with someone who requires assistance, please secure your mask first and then assist the other person. Thank you. Really? Really? Breathe normally? How was I ever supposed to breathe normally again? How were any of us ever supposed to breathe normally again? And as I've looked back on this journey over the last almost dozen years, I realized how many times I needed to secure my mask first and then secure the masks of others. Whether it was surgery, or chemo, or radiation, or 2 false alarms, I always made sure I had my mask secured so that I could help my friends and family during the decompression periods. And then the captain came over the PA system, only this time it was not Captain Cancer. He had been replaced by a new flight crew, my medical captains. Ladies and gentlemen, the tower has cleared us for takeoff. Flight attendants and cabin crew, please take your seats. So 5 days after the biopsy, I had my Miss October 1972 National Geographic Centerfold pendulous right breast removed. We had taken off, and we were ascending very rapidly. Now, instead of an in-flight magazine or a copy of Sky Mall, which I love, I had a little notebook that we started keeping notes in the day of my surgery. And in it, when the surgeon came to talk to my family after he was done, my mom wrote the following. A good day. No muscle involved. Nodes look clean. It looks good was written in all caps, followed by a big exclamation point. The morning of my release from the hospital, the oncology surgeon came in with different news. Now, I will never forget sitting on my bed, eating my Cheerios with neat little even banana slices that my mother had cut on top, when the doctor walked in. And to his surprise, and might I add, contrary to what was written in that little book, the results of the full biopsy and node dissection actually revealed cancer in 5 out of 12 of the lymph nodes that they removed. The next entry in the little book was this. More tumor, stage 3, invasive ductal carcinoma with residual extension. We'll need scans. At a stage where progression started, 80 to 90% chance it is nowhere else. First year is most important to be tumor-free. 5-year odds of survival with chemo, 80%. In the event of a decompression, an oxygen mask, blah, 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 started playing in an audio loop in my head. There are only 4 stages, and I had just been diagnosed with stage 3. Over the next 3 weeks, I had scan after scan to ensure that cancer had not spread. I had a port installed so that my veins would not collapse from all the poison that they were going to be pumping through my body. In the first meeting with my medical oncologist, Dr. Margaret Block, I obviously had many, many questions. After all, I've been writing things down in that little book since all of this started. Everything from the stuff that I heard on the news to things that I found on the internet while I was doing research. I hurled one question after another at her, and she took her time with me, and she answered each and every one of them. It took really only mere moments with her during that first consult for me to know that I was not in just good hands, but I was in the hands of a person who would and did save my life. We talked about the characteristics of my cancer, the chemo that I would be taking, adriamycin and Cytoxan, followed by Taxol, the radiation, she thought probably 7 weeks, the tamoxifen I would take for 5 years, and on and on. And as we talked, I was adding up the percentages that each protocol was increasing my chances for survival. Now, some of you probably already picked up on the fact that I'm kind of a geek, so I put all of this into a fancy little spreadsheet, color-coded for my viewing pleasure. And in the end, after everything was said and done, the numbers suggested that I had about an 82% chance of survival till 5 years. And that was almost 12 years ago. Exactly 4 weeks and 2 hours after I heard the words that resulted in the first big drop in cabin pressure, I started chemo. I was scheduled for every 3rd Friday. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign, and you may now move about the cabin freely. You may now turn on your electronic devices, and in a few moments, the flight attendants will be passing through the cabin to offer you hot or cold alcoholic drinks. Alcoholic drinks are also available at a nominal charge. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. Thank you. Just as we reached our cruising altitude, which I think was about 50 million feet above the Earth, the following announcement came over the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. We are now crossing a zone of turbulence. Please return to your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened. Thank you. Now really, by and large, I was one of the lucky ones. My turbulence, aka nausea, seemed to be confined to the Sunday following chemo, starting exactly at 2 p.m. and running through that following Tuesday at 5 p.m. like clockwork. And though I clung tightly to that air motion sickness bag that I found in the seat pocket in front of me, I never used it. Now, some of you will be able to relate to this. As is customary for women receiving the breast cancer cocktail of adriamycin and Cytoxan, every hair on my body fell out, except for the ones between my knees and my ankles, which meant that I still had to shave that summer. So I also consider this proof positive that God has a very wicked sense of humor. So 8 rounds of chemo were followed by 7 weeks of radiation, more turbulence. I'd heard about chemo, so I knew kind of what to expect, but nobody really ever filled me in on what the radiation was going to be like. Lots of folks know how sick chemo can make you, but I really wasn't prepared for the isolation of roughly 25 minutes each day of radiation, where the flight attendants would secure themselves behind a very thick lead cockpit door to make sure that they didn't get any of it. Nor was I prepared for the dead tired effect that would hit around week 3, or the radiation burns that started at week 5 and continued until they started to subside about a month after radiation ended. And finally, after all of that, I started a 5-year run of tamoxifen, which was followed by a 5-year run of Femara. And then, approximately 10 years after I boarded that cancer flight, the following announcement came over the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, as we start our descent, please make sure your seat backs and tray tables are in their full and upright positions. Make sure your seat belt is securely fastened and all carry-on luggage is stowed underneath the seat in front of you or in the overhead bin. Please turn off all electronic devices until we are safely parked at the gate. Also, please use caution when opening the overhead bins, as articles may have shifted around during flight. Thank you. And then, as abruptly as it had all started in that doctor's office that first Friday in March 2001, my flight ended. It was actually ending in much the same way it had begun, with my seat back and tray table in the full and upright position and my seatbelt securely fastened. And as it turned out, I did end up with a lot of emotional baggage, but it was a good kind, the kind that strengthens relationships and makes you appreciate the little things. And yes, some articles had shifted in the overhead bins during flight. In fact, everything shifted into a new normal. And that has actually been a really good thing. And here's why. My faith got stronger during that journey, and all physics aside, the finger of God is really what kept me aloft, not Newton or Bernoulli or airspeed or pressure. Most people think that I'm really, really, really crazy when I tell them that the year that I had cancer was the best year of my life. And you want to know why? It's because I got to find out what I was made of. And how many people can say that? I became a more patient person than I was before, though I will admit I had regressed a bit after deployment. But still, overall, don't pay any attention to these people at this table. They're my family. They don't know what they're talking about. I found the American Cancer Society and Relay for Life. Since 2001, they've given me a venue in which to repay the cosmic debt that I owed them, because that drug tamoxifen that I took for 5 years was discovered by research funded by the American Cancer Society. And for all the love and friendships that I have found there in the last 11 years, I remain humbled and eternally grateful. And I've met some incredible people along the way since the articles in my overhead bin shifted, from my chemo nurses, who I used to call angels with needles, beginning with that very first treatment, before which I am certain that there was a wicked game of rock, paper, scissors going on in the back to determine who was going to be the unfortunate one who had to administer the first dose of that high-strung control freak. To the friendships that we still have today. I could never repay their kindness, and I know that they would say they were just doing their jobs, but to me, it never felt like that. It felt intensely, intensely personal. And then the 98-year-old woman I met this summer in Merritt County at a relay there, who was a 60-plus year breast cancer survivor. She told me her incredible story of survival, and I will remain inspired by her courage forever. And then the final article in my overhead bin that shifted during my flight was that my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer just 18 months after I was. That was another moment of decompression when the oxygen mask descended and we all had to start the flow of oxygen all over again. But at the end of this month, in 22 days, I'm happy to say that my mom will celebrate 10 years of survival. Stand up, Mom. I didn't know it then, but the year that I was diagnosed with breast cancer, over 1.2 million people in the United States were newly diagnosed with some form of cancer. And of them, over 200,000 women and more than 1,300 men were diagnosed with breast cancer. This year in the United States, it is estimated that 1.6 million new cases of cancer will be diagnosed. And it's estimated that 226,870 women and 2,190 men will be diagnosed with breast cancer. And in our little state of Nebraska, an estimated 1,270 new cases in women will be diagnosed this year. Today, 1 in 2 women newly diagnosed with breast cancer reach out to the American Cancer Society for help and support. And on your tables, you all have a brochure, I believe it's this one here, for Making Strides. This is the Making Strides Against Breast Cancer Walk. And it's taking place here in Lincoln on October 28th at Holmes Lake Park. Registration starts at noon. The event itself starts at 1. There are 2 routes, a 1 mile and a 5K. There's a website that you can go to. I think all of that information is on the back of the brochure. So please take some time to read this. This is a great organization. They've been a part of my life since 2001 when I was diagnosed. And if they're not a part of yours, I encourage you to check this out. Finally, I encourage all of you to spread the word that early detection saves lives, and that mammography screenings help to find breast cancer at an early stage, leading to more treatment options, and better chances of survival. And I heard it's just amazing the number of machines and technicians that you guys have here. You are very, very lucky to live in a community like this. And for everyone here today, and for all of the women that we love, please, 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 do your routine breast self-examinations. Get mammograms at the prescribed times. And if you find something suspicious, get into your doctor right away. On behalf of I Kicked Cancer's Ass Airlines and the entire flight crew, I'd like to thank you all for joining me here today, and I hope that you have enjoyed your stay and your lunch. And remember that any landing that you can walk away from is a good landing. Thank you so much.
If you have any questions, feel free to stop by, visit about LifeSpring, check out the displays here, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you. And don't forget the roses. Everybody's get the roses.
Good job.
Very great job. Wow. Holy crap, she's good. Where was she when Obama needed a speech?
Say that again, Mom.
Where was Michelle when Obama needed a speechwriter?
Okay, everyone's still being videotaped.
I want to say something. Laughter through tears is my favorite emotion.
Say it again.
Laughter through tears is my favorite emotion.
This is going to go on YouTube, so keep it clean, because
We can edit.
You're going to be a British version of it.
One more time.
The BBC is waiting to end
you're going to have to
this.
do your voice.
Yeah, go ahead.
I need to